So what is human nature? What is the nature of man? How is man made? These are some of the, all similar questions, but some of the big questions of life. Questions that I remember going to college having even never thought of. And yet these are the deeper, more philosophical questions. And, human nature more or less refers to the characteristics of a person. It includes their way of thinking, their way of feeling, the way that they act. It's the way that humans tend to behave. Why is it that they, do the things that they do? Of course, if we are asked this question, all right, without, thinking, what's the first thing that comes to mind? If you're going to answer this question, if you have to reverse engineer the things that you see around us. In other words, if you take what you see in the world around us and you go, okay, why is it that they are that way? Or what is it that makes them do the things that they do? What answers would you come up with? I mean, think about all the things that are going on around the world, all around us. How would you characterize human nature when you think about, say, the Middle East? What is it that you think in terms of humans that make them act the way that they do? Why is it that they're, ISIS is now trying to take over? Why is it that, people are being beheaded? Why is it that, the problems in North Africa continue to go on? Why is it that Russia is now, on this, it seems, what they call it, like revenge, to go back and, capture their territory that they had before, where they're going into Crimea, eastern Ukraine, and now, Putin's talking about, so, well, if we wanted to, we can just go back and take, Poland and Estonia. And I have no doubt with the ease with which they took the Ukraine that they could go and do that because nobody is standing up to them. But why is it that they're acting this way, is my question. Is this the way that God created mankind when they were originally created? How did God create, in particular, the first man and woman? Some people, when they look at this and try to answer this question, they come to the conclusion that man and woman, Adam and Eve, were created in a broken state. Others say that they were predestined to fail, that they had no other choice, but that God made them so that they could fail, that they would fail. Others say that they were made perfect in this holy state from which they actually ended up falling. Some say, okay, you can't actually conclude things from scriptures. So let's begin by looking at the creation of Adam and Eve and the events surrounding it to find out what God actually did do. Let's begin in the creation week first off in Genesis 1. And we'll begin in Genesis 1 and verse 4. And here in the first chapter of Genesis, we'll just skip through a few scriptures, but let's look at the quality of God's work. Let's find out how God created things. In verse 4, it says, God saw the light that it was good. And then skipping down to verse 10, there's the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And then verse 12, and the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Verse 18, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, God saw that it was good. We're seeing a theme here. Verse 21, God created great sea creatures, every living thing that moves, every winged bird, and God saw that it was good. Verse 25, he made the beasts of the earth, and God saw that it was good. And then verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. And then verse 31, then God saw everything that he had made. And indeed, it was very good. It was wholly, Wholly, wholly good. And it's speaking vehemently here. He felt strongly and passionate, is what this word very conveys, about how good it was. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So 6 times we're told it was good. And then he sums it all back as if to, step back figuratively and looking at all that he created, including man and woman. He said it was very good. Adam and Eve were created in a very good way. And this is a very high standard because it's God who's doing the creating, God who is indeed perfect. So this alone would have to preclude the fact that they were made in a way that there was anything evil about them, including their nature. We look at the world around us and we go, well, that doesn't necessarily marry up. If you created them this way, why is the world evil like it is? Why is it that there's this nature that exists that we're talking about, one that's warlike or bellicose, that is greedy, that is self-serving, self-centered? Where is it then that this comes from? So by the same time, though, by the same token, it doesn't mean that Adam and Eve were complete in their creation. In fact, there was a vital component missing in their creation, one that would allow them to understand the mind of God and God's way. They were not created with the Holy Spirit dwelling in them. But God only offered them the gift of the Spirit through the partaking of the tree of life. Let's begin in chapter 2 and verse 9. Genesis 2:9. It says, out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. These 2 trees. Verse 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Very clear, very simple instructions. But also, they could eat of the tree of life, but not of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve were created as free moral agents with this ability to choose. God wanted them to build holy, righteous character. But this type of character can only be developed through the experiences that we have and making the subsequent right decision after the fact. Let's look at chapter 3 and verse 2 and see that Eve, in this situation, did not build character, not the holy, righteous character that God had hoped. And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. So, Eve understood the instructions very clearly whenever she reiterated it to the serpent. God had instructed her correctly. She understood it correctly. So, at this point in time, neither Adam nor Eve, in the timeline of this story, has shown any type of predisposition of going against what they were taught and what they were instructed by God. So what is it then that changed and brought about man's sin, this change in his nature? So verse 4, let's notice the ungodly influence that's introduced, the serpent. Then the serpent, which is none other than Satan the devil, said to the woman, you will not surely die. Just a blatant contradiction of what God had already told them. God their Father, God their Creator, their Maker, who made them very good, told them the exact opposite of that. But here's Satan, kind of getting in the last shot, the last word. In verse 5, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So here's Satan introducing a little bit of error with a little bit of truth, because their eyes would be opened, as we will see here shortly. But he did say, you will not die. So when Satan starts to manipulate and to work on Eve, he's not putting her arm behind her back and forcing her to the tree and saying, I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to break your arm or whatever if you don't take that fruit of the tree and eat it. He's not doing it by force, but he begins to work on her until he corrupts her, until he deceives her. Verse 6. So when the woman saw the tree was good for food, so it seemed, that it was pleasant to the eyes, a tree desirable to make one wise. We see a little bit of intellectual vanity creeping in. She took of the fruit and ate, and she also gave it to her husband with her, and he ate. So after succumbing to the wiles of the devil, eating of the tree that God told them not to, a change happens. Verse 7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. It did indeed happen. And they knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. So at the devil's urging of choosing this different way of life, one that looks good and looks pleasant to the eyes of both of them were opened, and they began to act differently. Verse 8. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. And the Lord called out to Adam and said, where are you? So he said, I heard your voice in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. Is that the way that they acted before? No, if you can, just look back in verse 25 of chapter 2. Genesis 2:25 says, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. So what we're seeing here is there was not a change in the way that they acted until Satan was introduced on the scene, till he began to deceive them, till he began to tell them lies, before he began to influence them. So the change in nature, the way that they would, quote unquote, naturally behave, coincided with the eating of the fruit of the wrong tree and the following of the instructions of Satan. So because of this decision to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil on their own, of their own volition, remember, it wasn't, Satan didn't force them in that way. He influenced them. But because they did that, they were in effect rebelling against God and his way. God had given them the instructions, but now they're going against those instructions, which they had no reason to go against until Satan entered the scene. Chapter 2, verse 16. You see, the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. You will eventually die. Adam and Eve had opted to follow Satan's direction and yield to his influence, even though they were told that that was a path that would lead to death. Back over to chapter 3 and verse 22. So God had actually given them the opportunity to follow him in his way and, get this, live forever. He was giving them that opportunity. Chapter 3, verse 22 says, then the Lord God said, behold, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil, and now lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life, eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden until the ground from which he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So we see that man was not made in a deficient state, nor was he predestined to fail, but there was a different influence on their nature. He was not made in this holy state from which he fell, but man chose to follow this wrong path. and be subject to a different father and a different influence on their nature. Adam and Eve were created with the opportunity and the hope that they would choose God and the tree of life, which was available to them. Instead, they willingly adopted another nature as their own. So in doing so, they put themselves and the rest of humanity on this similar path, one that leads to death. In fact, it doesn't take long before we see the full physical effect of human nature realized when Cain gives in to the wrong father. We'll talk a little bit more about that term as we come along. But in Genesis 4 and verse 3, what we're seeing here is, quote unquote, human nature as it became with the influence of Satan on it. In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord, as he was instructed. You don't just do those type of things without somebody telling you to do them. It's not natural, as it were. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. Now, I think we can look at fat and say, okay, that means something good. That whether it was the actual fat of the flock, or it was the biggest one of the flock, or if it was the excess of the flock, all of them, tend to mean the same thing. And as we go on, we'll see that Abel had the right motives in doing what he did. And as it says right here in the next sentence, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering. So it was a good thing that Abel was doing. Abel was making this offering in a right way. Verse 5, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. So Cain wasn't doing his offering in the right way, and Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? Verse 7 of chapter 4. If you do well, will you not be accepted? So the offering that Cain was doing, he wasn't doing well. He wasn't doing something right. He wasn't giving his best like Abel was doing. We can all try to guess at what exactly he was doing. But whatever it was, when he was giving of the fruit of the land, it wasn't the way that it should have been done. It continues in verse 7, and if you do not do well, and he wasn't doing well, right? Sin lies at the door. This is what happens. In Genesis 49:9, it uses the same word for lies, but some of the versions say crouched. And in that context of 49:9, it says crouched down as a lion. So it lies at the door, like a lion, waiting to pounce on you. This is how the sin lies at the door. And then it devours you. And what does that bring to mind? What type of images? It's like Satan, who, roams around as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. I mean, that's what the thoughts come to my mind. So here it is. If you do not do well, sin lies at the door. Now Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass that the lion pounced. This crouching lion. When they were in the field, then Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. There's the sin, becoming manifest. Why did these things happen? Matthew 23:35, it's Christ speaking, and I'll just cite this. It talks about righteous Abel. It's Christ's words. He calls Abel righteous Abel. He says that Abel was righteous. And of course, righteousness only comes from God through Christ. But this righteousness is attributed to Abel. And I'll also cite Hebrews 4:11, which says, by faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts. Through it being dead still speaks. Though through it he being dead still speaks. So Abel did indeed offer a better sacrifice, a righteous sacrifice, a right one. And here he is. He's talking that Abel had faith as well. He's listed among those in the faith chapter of Hebrews 11. So we know that what Abel was doing, he was doing right, and that he was indeed following the instructions, not sinning, what God had told him to do. Now, who was Cain's influence in his life? Who was Cain's father? Let's turn to 1 John 3 and verse 11. 1 John 3, 11 and 12. So 1 John 3 and verse 11 said, "For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain." Of course, Cain didn't love, right? That's not love, killing your brother. Not even, that was literal killing of the brother. We're supposed to love them and not kill them, even in a spiritual manner, not hate them. But Cain was so far beyond that. Said, we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the wicked one. He was of the wicked one. That was who his father was. That's where his actions came from. And because of that, what did he do? He murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. The things that Cain was doing were evil. They were against God. They were not following what God had said. He was being influenced adversely by Satan, who he was of. Let's go up to verse 8 of the chapter. And John just expounds on this concept a little more. He who sins is of the devil. Cain sinned, not only Cain, but all have sinned. In that respect, as long as you do sin, you are of the devil. For the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose, the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. This is the work that the devil is doing, is this influencing of mankind, the influencing of the nature of mankind. Whoever, in verse 9, has been born of God does not sin, for his seed remains in him, and he cannot sin because he has been born of God. In this, the children of God, on one hand, and the children of the devil are manifest. If you are the children of the devil, that means the devil is your father and not God. If you're the children of God, that means God is your father. Cain was of his father, the devil. That is the one that Cain chose. That's who he chose to listen to be influenced by. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is he who does not love his brother. So who was Cain's father? Cain was of the wicked one. He was of his father, the devil. This is who he gave into. This is who he was influenced by, just as John here distinguishes between the two groups, the children of God and the children of the devil. And this is why Cain murdered his brother, because of this undue influence that Satan exerted, and that, again, that Cain gave into. John 8, verse 44. Let's go ahead and turn there, even though it's just a single scripture. Is Christ's words, Christ speaking. Notice how he defines these that he's talking to. John chapter 8 and verse 44. I think it's the Pharisees that he is talking to here. He says, "You are of your father, the devil." This is what he's talking to, the Jews of his time, saying, you are of your father. That's who you belong to. That's who you listen to. That's who you have as your father, the devil. And the desires of your father, you want to do. So the things that Satan wants, These desires that he foists upon, in particular these guys at the time, but all mankind, you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning. This is a direct reference to Cain. From the very beginning of mankind, he influenced Cain. It was of his own self that he did this, because he didn't get these ideas from anybody else. These are Satan's ideas. He was the father of them. So from the beginning, and does not stand in truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, which he did, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. That is, when I speak of the father, the devil, that's who we're talking about. That's who he is. That's what he is. And that's the bill of goods that he is selling. I don't guess I need to belabor the point, that we are sons of the wicked one. I'll just, cite them in Matthew 13:38. It says, we are sons of the wicked one. In Acts 13:9, that was Christ speaking. And in Acts 13:9 and 10, Paul is saying that you are sons of the devil. So this isn't a foreign concept to us, or to the Bible, or to the way the world is. Either a son of God or a son of the devil. But what is it that these authors, whether it's Matthew or Paul or Luke or Christ speaking, what is it that they are saying? They're saying that it is Satan that molds our human nature with his. In the beginning, Satan was not that way. Again, that's not the way God creates things. He created, if we look back at Ezekiel 28:15, Lucifer, when he was created, was perfect in his ways until iniquity was found in him. Then he became the devil, Satan, our adversary, the one that we know. And he became this way, as John was talking about, from his own resources. He became this way on his own. And he is the father of that way. And he's working in the people of the world, leading them to disobedience. Ephesians 2, verses 1 through 3. Ephesians 2, verses 1 through 3. We see this Satan at work and how he works. And you he made alive who were dead in trespasses and sin. This is where the sin leads. It leads to death. And that is going to be your ultimate outcome from the very beginning. This is what God told them and tried to tell them. But they did not listen to him. In which you once walked. This is the way we all were. According to the course of this world, the way of this world. According to, and we have a description of Satan, the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. This is the way Satan works in terms of trying to influence us. He is the prince of the power of the air, and he leads his children into disobedience. He is not of the truth. He is the opposite. He is trying to lead everybody the other way, if at all possible, and by any means at his disposal. Among whom, in verse 3, also we all once conducted ourselves. We used to act that way. In the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh. Remember, we were talking about the desires? It becomes our desire. Satan's desires become our desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature. It was our nature to be children of wrath. We took upon ourselves, as Satan foisted it upon us as well, to become this way, to make this our nature. We became children of Satan, of the devil, sons of the wicked one, sons of disobedience, just as the others, just as everybody else was. This was our nature too. So we once gave into the father of lies, as the rest of the world does. It's in their human nature, their nature now, to be children of wrath, sons of disobedience as they continue to be influenced by Satan. Sometimes it's even overtly. I was looking at the news, and y'all may have seen it's kind of been ongoing there in Oklahoma. They want to have a black mass, a mass to Satan, which is obviously a very dangerous thing. They're making a point to a certain degree. To what degree that they believe in it, I'm not sure. But again, they're going to start messing with things that they shouldn't be messing with. But they're trying to do this indirect contravention to, like, the mass of the Catholics, which they see as being Christian. But anyway, that's overt, if there is overt. That's the way Satan can work if people completely give in to him. But many are not fooled by that. I mean, nobody at the table is fooled by this. But all fall for some of his subtle ploys. Revelation 12:9, I'll just cite it for you, says, the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. It doesn't say deceives most of the world. It doesn't say deceives 99.9% of the world. He deceives the whole world. That is how powerful it is. That is how subtle it is. And he's going to keep on doing these types of things until he can't do them anymore. And as this father of lies, this very intelligent being, he was, as God called him, the perfect creation, he, in being subtle and intelligent, learns to mix truth and error. So he takes some of the God's truth and uses his many tools at his disposal in order to drive man further from God. Let's turn to 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11, verses 2 through 4. Notice how far he'll even go and some of the tools that he does employ. And that he does indeed do these things. 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 2. For I am jealous for you with godly jealousy, for I have betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you a chaste virgin to Christ. This is what Paul wants to do. This is his longing, his desires. He is led by the example of Christ through God. But I fear, here's his concern, lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, note how he did it by his craftiness, not the twisting of the arm behind the back, literally, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. It's a warning to church members that they too can fall for this deception, this craftiness, this slyness that Satan employs. For if he who comes preaches another Jesus, whom you have not preached, whom we have not preached, or if you receive a different spirit, not the Spirit of Christ or God, which you have not received, or a different gospel, if it changes, in one iota, one dot, one jot, one tittle, which you have not accepted, you may well put up with it. And then skipping down to verse 13, he pretends to be something that he's not. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Can you imagine that? That Satan can appear to be an angel of good. That's how powerful he is. That's a deception that we can fall under and to. Therefore, it's no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose ends will be according to their works. Of course, the Bible talks about this, that this is going to be in the end time, that these things are going to present themselves in a manner that it's going to be many false prophets, many deceivers trying to corrupt the people of God. Specifically, you don't have to put necessarily as much effort into those who are already corrupted, who are already blind. But the point is that this is how Satan can work. This is how deceitful and clever he can be. And this is why that we need to be constantly on guard in terms of the influences of our nature. Turn over to 1 John 4:1, please. 1 John 4:1 through 6. And see what we are to do when we're faced with these things. 1 John 4 and verse 1. Also, as we go through, note the battle it is that we fight. Beloved, do not believe every spirit. Okay? There's only one spirit, one right spirit, one true spirit. How can we tell? Test the spirits. Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. You know, there are people who say he didn't come. Some that say he didn't come in the flesh. And every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, or against Christ, which you have heard was coming, and now already in the world. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in this world that we live in. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in this world. They are of the world. Therefore they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We are of God. He who knows God hears us. He who is not of God does not hear us. And then note this. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. The spirit of error. There's another spirit out there. The Spirit of God, the Spirit of truth, influences us in one way, those who have God's Holy Spirit. And the spirit of error is well and alive out there, trying to influence us another way. And it is succeeding in influencing the world. We do not fight a physical battle. Okay? What I've been trying to say, Satan's not twisting the arm behind the back physically. But we fight against a spirit of error that influences our nature, influences mankind's nature, who and what we are. It influences that in a way that makes us want to comply with the wrong that he, Satan, is projecting. Ephesians 6, verses 11 through 13. Let's look at this battle a little bit more. In Ephesians 6, verses 11 through 13. Put on the whole armor of God. And we're not going to go through the armor of God, but it's a spiritual armor because it's a spiritual battle. That you may be able to stand against what? The wiles of the devil, the wily ways of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Satan uses many devices to derail us, to knock us further off the track. His method cannot be discerned by the five senses. He's the prince of the power of the air. He is constantly inundating us, all of us, with his spirit of error. It's by these means that Satan is able to hold the people of this world and enslave them to do his will. 2 Timothy 2, verses 23 through 26. 2 Timothy 2, verses 23 through 26. avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. And a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach. Is that where we all are? Are we able to teach the words that we know? Do we know what we believe? Patient, in humility, correcting those who are in opposition, if God perhaps will grant them repentance, so that they may know the truth. So he's talking about these people in the world. There's a chance, God could be calling them, and that he might be using you to call them, that they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the devil, having been taken captive by him to do his will. Does the world believe this? Do they believe that they are in the snare of the devil? That they've been captured by him? Enslaved by him? To do his will? They are. These are the things that we're avoiding on a daily basis. But they do his will. They're never going to say they do. How is it then that they do this? They are influenced by him. He exerts his nature upon them, his desires. And they, in turn, do the things that he wants. He lies to them, and they murder. Okay, now we look back at the world and the condition that it is in overall. Do we not see Satan's handiwork? Do we not see him alive and well? Do we not see him taking the whole world captive and having them do his will? Luke 4, verses 5 through 8. Currently, Satan is the ruler of this world. He's the god of this world. And he is well and truly exercising his authority. Luke 4, verses 5 through 8. We come to the temptation of Christ. Then the devil, taking him, being Jesus Christ, up on a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. It shows a little bit of the magnitude of the power of Satan. And the devil said to him, all this authority, okay, he's saying that I have authority here, I will give you in this reign over the world. I will give you and their glory, for this has been delivered to me, and I give it to whomever I wish. No, I mean, the audacity of that statement. Who would agree with that if they read that? I didn't the first time I read it, or somebody told me. I didn't read it to begin with. But he says all this authority. He's claiming the authority, that he can give it to Christ. And Christ said, that's not yours to give. No. He goes on and says, therefore, if you will worship before me, all will be yours. And what was Christ's answer? He said, get behind me, Satan. For it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only you shall serve. What? Was that the answer? I mean, that he really needed to give? Couldn't he just say, well, this isn't yours? Wouldn't that have just solved it? Well, it would have, if it was true. But it's not. Christ said in John 14:30, if you want to just write that in your notes, he says, I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming. He has nothing in me. The ruler, Christ called Satan the ruler of the world because he was the ruler of the world. It was his to give. He had the authority that he could transfer to Christ if he wanted. Satan has his domain here right now. Now, the good news we find in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 3 and 4, is that it's only for a while longer. It's a temporary position. He's just a temp. 2 Corinthians 4, verses 3 and 4 says, but even if our gospel is veiled, It is veiled to those who are perishing. So only those who are subject to Satan don't see the gospel, don't understand what it is. Because, verse 4, whose minds the God of this age has blinded. He is the God of this time, of this period. And he has blinded who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel, the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. Brethren, Satan is alive and well. And if it were possible, okay, I say if it were possible, he would be stepping up his efforts. I say that because I don't know that it's possible for a spirit being to actually tire. Why would he actually not be giving it 100% right now? I think he is giving it 100%, as much as God will allow. So if it was possible, he would step up his influence in this end time to influence man, to specifically influence us and our nature, and try to distract us with his spirit of error from the Spirit of God working in our lives. And he would seek, and he does seek, to become our Father. And he is the Father of this world. He has influenced their natures. They give in to him. They see him. They have him as their Father. But we have a choice. Let's look at that in Romans 6 and verse 16. Romans 6 and verse 16. One last scripture. Romans chapter 6 and verse 16. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey? So who is it that you are yielding to? Whose influence? Is it God's or Satan's? Whoever you yield to, that is your God. To whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves, whom you obey. Who is it that you're listening to? Are you listening to Satan? Are you listening to God, or his Holy Spirit? Whether of sin leading to death, right? Is that one that you may present yourself slaves to? Or of obedience leading to righteousness? Those are the two choices. We have the children of disobedience on one hand, and the children of God on the other. The sin leading to death, and the obedience leading to righteousness. Let's choose the latter. Let's choose the better. Let's choose God, the Father.